In today's changing retirement landscape, one thing seems to be sticking out. People are retiring earlier, often before the age of 65. And in doing so, they may be overlooking one of the most important aspects of financial retirement planning, which is medical costs. We'll talk about that next on The Capitalist Investor. Hey, Tony, how we doing today, man?
I'm doing well.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yep. Well, hey, this week we wanted to, talk about something. It'd probably be a little more of a quick topic, but something that we see all the time now, right? And it's people retiring before the age of 65. So, one of the biggest expenses, I would say, to doing that is, if you and your spouse are retired before 65, how are you going to pay for medical, and kind of how is all that going to work out?
It has to be accounted for. I mean, I know we do, but it really does. It is so expensive. It could cost $2,000 plus a month.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're looking for, if you're worried about deductibles, what's your health look like. I know some people just kind of grind it through to 65 because they know what medical really costs, pre-65. So it is definitely something to consider. And, I guess if you really want to think about it, you could retire at 63 and hop on Cobra, but you're paying full price of a group plan, not an individual plan. You know what, though? The biggest thing really is finding the right person to get you in one of these policies, because you're going to be a commission-driven kind of person.
Yep.
And then if you go on the Google machine and you type in your information, you're cooked.
Yeah.
Right. You're gonna get bombed.
You have to change your phone number.
Oh my God. Yeah. They got your email, your name, and your phone number. You're cooked, man. So, knowing somebody in this space, or at least just trying to hone in on one person that can help you, could really save you a lot of time and frustration on that side. But it's like, who do you trust? Because what's their motive? Right.
Yep.
So
exactly. So yeah, I'd say, we can kind of start from the top. This number has only increased throughout the years, but on researching for this show, I came up with a cost of about $315,000 is what a couple will spend on healthcare in retirement.
If you're retiring at 65.
Yeah, exactly. So retiring at, obviously, if you retired at 60, that would add 5 full years that you would need to pay for something. And like Tony mentioned, COBRA, Affordable Care Act, or a spouse's plan are really kind of the major things to look at if you are retiring before the age of 65.
Yep. So I think some of your options, if you're looking in the pre-65, is obviously you got COBRA. If you're working, you should be able to offer your current employer's plan, but at full cost.
Right.
Right. And that can be very costly. You usually get that for about 18 months, and then there's some fees strapped on top of that. The Affordable Care Act marketplace. Oof. Yeah. It comes in a couple different tiers. That your premiums could be based off of your income and maybe not your assets, right?
Yep.
So could retire with $2 million in a traditional IRA, but low annual withdrawals may qualify for substantial subsidies. So you got to get on the ramen noodle diet prior to 65 to cut down on medical, right? So is that really what you want to do? Or do you want to start enjoying retirement, or do you want to cut down your expenses just because you are worried about the medical costs, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I would say I run across this one quite a bit, where people are trying to stay on the lowest cost portion of the Affordable Care Act before they retire, which is certainly a strategy. So things you have to keep in mind for that. Number one, it's I believe, Tony, it's a 2-year lag on the income. So for what you're paying today, that would be based on your income from 2 years ago. So there's a lag there. So So if you retire today, say at 60, we're using your old income for the cost on the Affordable
so you
Care
could be
Act.
shooting yourself in the foot and not have to worry about it. It works like how Irma.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's something to keep in mind. But I would say whether it's COBRA, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, you just need to capture the cost of insurance in your financial plan.
Yeah. And I know some people will be like, well, you know what? I've heard about those HSAs. I mean, can I start saving into that? And I'm like, well, that depends if you're working and your employer has a high deductible plan.
Right.
Right? Because there's the high deductible plan, which offers the HSA for you to sock money into, or you got the traditional plan. And if your employer's on a traditional plan, with low deductibles, you don't have access to the HSA.
Yeah.
So you just because you've heard of it, it can be a good idea. You just might not have access to it.
Right.
Right. But if you do, socking that money away. And I've seen some strategies if you do have access to the HSA. Is one strategy is put the money in there and don't use it as a piggy bank for prescriptions. Like pay for it out of pocket while you're working, because you just dedicate this account for when you retire.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I've seen people say like you can turn your HSA into an IRA in retirement if you'd like as well.
Yep.
So those are some options, but I mean I would keep it for healthcare, right? I wouldn't do the latter.
Yeah. So HSA plans, you know, if you can, especially in the pre-retirement years, if you can sock away as much money in those as possible, you can use that to pay for those deductibles in retirement.
Right, but that's where the episode last week we talked about building a plan. So if you want to retire, if you're 50 years old, for example, and you want to retire at 62. Well, you got 3 years before Medicare starts. So if that's the case, maybe you start planning right now at age 50 to sock away money into the HSA so that those 3 years are covered, but you started 12 years before you needed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be something along them lines.
Yep.
So again, everything comes down to planning, and you know, worrying about it last minute, stuff could have been taken care of years and years ago, decades ago, and you just have to have the vision.
Yep. So let's go into the Affordable Care Act and kind of how that works. I touched on it a little bit as we got into this here, but the subsidies are available to individuals and families between 100% and 400% of the poverty level. So that's kind of what I was talking to earlier about how your income can be used to give you certain benefits through the Affordable Care Act.
And you know what, though? I mean, because like you mentioned before, because the Affordable Care Act is, kind of designed on income, again, this comes into a strategy that needs to be implemented years before. If you are saving all your money in a traditional IRA, all the distributions are taxable.
Yep.
That's why it's important to build the other buckets, if you can, into the Roths and even cash, non-qualified brokerage accounts,
yep.
right? Because you have a fighting chance to pay no taxes if you can sell a winner and a loser, zero-sum game on a non-qualified account, or just take the distributions from a Roth. You know, I usually like to leave the Roth for like the last money we spend because it's the most efficient.
Yep.
But this, by doing a plan and designing the plan to pay for those premiums out of a Roth, I bet you the Monte Carlos go up substantially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just, again, it really comes down to planning on what do you want to do, when do you want to retire, what are the buckets of money that you have, and then what plan are you going to hitch your wagon to?
Yep, absolutely. I think optimization is the word that comes to mind because, we're all these things in retirement, especially in the kind of the gap years between, say, like 60 and 65. that's also a good time for, say, like Roth conversions. That's also a good time for Social Security optimization. So all of these things with income kind of relate to each other. So it's never too early to start planning for things like that.
Yep.
Because, healthcare might not be fun to talk about. It might not be fun as like investments or,
It's not very fun at all.
No, it's not fun at all. So it's not just a line item expense in your retirement plan. It is something that we need to plan for and plan around.
Yeah, it's as much as it's not fun to talk about, it is probably one of the most critical things to talk and consider.
Yeah. And, it's not necessarily your asset level, it's your income level. So, that's another thing, right? If you retire at 62 and, you got a bunch of stuff you want to do and you're going crazy, with the income and pulling all kinds of money out of your retirement plans, that's going to affect your healthcare expenses in the future.
Yep. All right, to kind of put a bow on this one, again, healthcare is not a line item, it's a strategy. And we talked about that. Hey, can we sock money in HSA? Is it available to you? Or should we start building a bucket strategy well ahead of time that's going to be tax efficient when it is time Medicare? Again, you just mentioned it right before, assets, and it's not about assets, it's about income. So building the right buckets to be tax efficient is important. And then just building, and again, if you got the HSA, most tax efficient thing we can do.
Yep. So yeah, make sure we're thinking about and we're planning for medical costs in retirement. And we'll wrap it up there. But thanks everyone for listening this week. We appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, ideas for our show, any comments, hit us up at info@swpconnect.com, and we'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.